Are allergies bothering you? Is pollen a problem in your life? I'm Dr. Brian McDonough, and welcome to Primary Care Today on ReachMD. I'm joined by a very special guest. A real pleasure to have him with us. He's Dr. Mitchell Gaynor. He is Clinical Assistant Professor of Medicine at Weill Cornell Medical College in New York City. He's the author of an upcoming book, The Gene Therapy Plan, Take Control of Your Genetic Destiny with Diet and Lifestyle. Tell me a little bit about how this frigid, wintered, and delayed allergy season in trees could be impacting the type of spring we're going to be facing.
Well, it's an interesting term, pollen vortex. It sort of comes from polar vortex, and it has to do with the fact that we've had, very difficult winter in terms of ice, in terms of snow, in terms of extremely cold temperatures. So instead of spring sort of easing in the way that it has the last several years, all the pollen has been sort of stored up, if you will. None of it has been released, and so what we're seeing is just very, very high levels of tree pollen going forward for this time of the year, and I think we can expect one of the worst allergy seasons ever because of that.
With the allergy seasons as they go, obviously on the East Coast where you're based, spring, this is a pretty particularly tough time. How about as we go Midwest, out West, similar deal?
It is because really the Midwest has also been hit pretty hard with very cold temperatures, a lot of precipitation in the form of ice, rain, snow, and that's delayed, tree pollen from being released in a more gradual manner than usual. So we do have what's called this pollen vortex. So I think physicians are going to be seeing quite a bit more seasonal allergies than we've seen in probably at least a decade.
Now, we have, again, physician audience. We're used to dealing with our patients. They come in with allergy symptoms. It's often very confusing, frustrating to deal with. How do you approach your patients? What do you do to try to work with them to deal with this?
Well, there is a lot of data as far as, there's certainly the medications, there are the antihistamines and, leukotriene blockers like Singulair. There are the nasal corticosteroids that some people will need. But, the average person, that just has tree pollen allergies, maybe they'll be coming in with scratchy throat, watery eyes. And I tell people to use a humidifier. I think a neti pot to flush sinuses for people that it becomes chronic is a good idea. Occasionally we'll use nasal cromolyn as well, but there are a lot of nutrients and things that people can do as well, and I think it's also important to take a good family history about allergies because there's a huge genetic link as well. There was actually one study of about 400 families, and if neither parent had a history of asthma, only 6% of the children developed it. If there was just one of the parents that was asthmatic, 20% of their children developed asthma. And families where both parents had asthma, 60% of the children had it too. So, you can really look and see that there's more of a what we call epigenetic gene expression component to this. And that's even more profound if you look at twins. If you look at identical twins, if one suffers from hay fever, asthma, eczema, then 50 to 80% of the time the other twin is going to have it. And in fraternal twins, that drops down to about 35%. So there is an epigenetic, a gene expression component that has to do with histamine release and sensitivities to developing seasonal allergies, asthma, eczema, things like that.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Primary Care Today on ReachMD. I'm Dr. Brian McDonough, your host, and with me is Dr. Mitchell Gaynor. Dr. Gaynor is founder and president of Gaynor Integrative Oncology and Gaynor Wellness. He's based in New York City. He's an author. Your background is very interesting. You served as director of medical oncology at the Strang Cancer Prevention Center in New York, as well as medical director and director of medical oncology at Weill Cornell Medical Center for Complementary and Integrative Medicine in New York.
You know, it is something that would almost seem counterintuitive. I really became interested in it. I did my internship, my residency, fellowship. I was chief medical resident at Cornell. I did fellowships in both hematology and oncology and at Cornell. And as part of my oncology fellowship, Rockefeller University is literally right next door. And I was doing molecular biology research on the regulation of immune system genes. And we were studying how those genes could be regulated. So, you know, when I was in medical school, and when most of us were, you know, we were taught that the genes we received from our parents, that pretty much determined your genetic risk of everything from cancer to obesity to diabetes to premature aging. And this science of epigenetics, epi means above, that has to do with the various nutrients and toxins that we take into our body from the environment. Those can turn on and off everything from tumor suppressor to tumor promoter genes to genes regulating the immune system, whether it's overactive in terms of autoimmune disease and allergic conditions, food sensitivities, and even type 2 diabetes and obesity, insulin insensitivity, leptin insensitivity. All these things are related to what we're putting in our body and how they affect gene expression. So this is, you know, a field that's becoming known as ecogenetic medicine, and it really has to do with what we're putting in our body and how it regulates gene expression for a variety of different conditions.
What are the things we do that harm our body? Obviously, we know in our own diets there's certain things we do, processed foods, those types of things. But tell us, from your perspective, for our own patients, what are the healthy guidelines we should provide?
Well, I think there are several. I think it's very important that one of the things I started noticing early on in my career is that there were so many commonalities with the causes of cancer and the causes of obesity and diabetes and aging, heart disease. And those commonalities, a lot of the times it comes down to inflammation. So we used to just think it was, you know, high cholesterol and the wrong types of cholesterol that was causing heart disease. Now we know that you also need inflammatory damage of the endothelial cell wall that will happen from too much white sugar, too much white flour, too many heat-damaged oils, and then a variety of other environmental toxins. And the other thing that I think we tend to have overlooked over the years is the gut, you know, the GI tract. And the gut microbiome, I describe it, it's like, you know, a rainforest in our bodies. The gut microbiome, the number of genes in there make up more genes than in the rest of the human body. And we really have to take care of it. So there are some important bacteria you need to have in there and nourish: acidophilus, lactobacillus, bifidobacteria. So what does that have to do with allergies? We know that children who have a lower variety of these gut microbiotic bacteria are a much greater increased risk for food sensitivities and food allergies to things like peanuts, milk, and eggs. And that goes on into adulthood. And it shouldn't be any surprise, because when you have dysbiosis in the gut, you're releasing inflammatory mediators like IL-6, AP1, NF-kappa B. These are things that are going to promote insulin resistance and promote inflammation. All this is occurring at an epigenetic level. So it's very important, you know, to consider taking a probiotic with at least a billion colony-forming units per capsule, to include things in your diet like Greek yogurt, preferably with no added sugar, and kefir cultures. fermented foods like sauerkraut and miso. Those are all good. And then you want to also have enough prebiotic nutrients. Those include nutrients like inulin and oligofructose. You'll find those in different whole grains like barley and spelt. You'll find them in kale, and you'll find them in things like chicory leaves in abundance. So, the whole grains, have gotten sort of a bad rap, in the popular fad diets. But whole grains are broken down in the gut to short-chain fatty acids. Those are critical for the gut microbiome, and also they're critical for something called GALT, which is gut-associated lymphoid tissue. So a lot of allergic things really do start in the gut. A lot of inflammatory disease and insulin insensitivity starts in the gut.
So for your average physician out there who's saying, all right, I went to traditional medical school, got traditional medical education, moved along, did those things, and I'm interested in this or want to learn. Where do you even begin? Because much of this obviously wasn't taught in medical school. You don't have it in board recertification tests or in continue. Where do you find out this information and read?
I would say my new book, really, it's loaded with hundreds and hundreds. Everything in there is referenced, to the journal. So the gene therapy plan is really a great resource for physicians. I've also created a website where I put the latest scientific information on there and have, meal plans and juicing regimens, really, all based in the science of ecogenetics. And that website is called genechanger.com, G-E-N-E, changer.com. And so many physicians, have told me that it's really changed the way they practice medicine. And
when you do this and you look at it, obviously, do you still hold on to the traditional things we've taught in medical school and in training as well? Is this an adjunct, replacement, or how do you see it?
I see it as a complete adjunct. So, I have two facets to my practice. I have Gaynor Integrative Oncology and Gaynor Wellness, which is largely prevention, Gaynor Wellness. But, my oncology practice, we give chemotherapy. There's all the new immune checkpoint inhibitors, which is literally revolutionizing the treatment of solid tumors. And there are a number of other things on the horizon as far as doing molecular profiling of different tumors. So, my understanding very deeply of molecular biology and gene expression has served me very well, both, on the clinical side. So I use, everything that allopathic medicine has to offer as far as drugs and other treatments. But also, this is a way of really engaging in treating a lot of the underlying causes. And there's so much science on this now. I really feel it's reached a critical mass in the last couple of years. As far as taking a probiotic, we're talking about allergies. People should make sure they're getting enough magnesium. A lot of people don't realize magnesium is very important, especially in asthmatics, for adequate airway function. You can get magnesium in spinach, in kale, in almonds. Bioflavonoids, those have been found to reduce the amount of histamine, and it modifies the body's response to different allergens, again, on a gene expression level. So bioflavonoids are found in Brussels sprouts, mangoes, papayas, garlic, and even green tea. So I recommend patients do that. And there's another critical nutrient doctors can recommend. It's called quercetin. Quercetin is a flavanol, and it suppresses an overactive immune system as far as IgE and histamine release, and it also helps break down the histamine that's been released. And you can get quercetin in apples, especially Granny Smith apples, onions, parsley, sage, grapes. They all are loaded with quercetin. And I also feel it's very important for women of childbearing age to breastfeed their babies. Breastfeeding has been found in numerous studies to help ward off allergic disease by lowering kids' exposure to exogenous antigens, protecting against infections, but mostly by promoting GI mucosal maturation and the development of a healthy gut microbiome.
Dr. Mitchell Gaynor, wow, we ran out of time. I want to thank you so much for sharing your insights and so many ideas. And obviously, for people who are listening to the program, you gave your websites an opportunity for people to learn more and find out more about this. And I agree with you that as time goes on, we're learning more and more about genetics, epigenetics, and the role of all these factors. This is Dr. Brian McDonough. If you missed part of this discussion, you can visit us at reachmd.com/primary care today. You can download a podcast. You can learn more about the series. And we really appreciate your time, Dr. Gaynor. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.